A very good evening to you and welcome to our program Business Today, your weekly business show on Channel I, where we give you an in-depth look at today's business landscape. We do have a personality this week as well, so it's time for us to head into the personality. Our business personality this week is someone connected to the apparel industry. So as I mentioned, that is connected to the apparel industry. Today on Business Today, we'll be touching on this industry and about what's going to happen in the future, what's in store, and the latest innovations they are intending to do. So we'll be touching on all those topics today. But before all that, let's check out who our business personality of the week is.
Hasitha Premaratne is the Group Finance Director of Brandix Group. He leads the overall finance function of the group and is also responsible for strategy and long-range planning. He is the Managing Director of Brandix India Apparel City and overlooks all joint ventures and investments of the Brandix Group. He is a director of many subsidiaries of Brandix Group, including listed company TJ Lanka plc. He was formerly a director of Bank of Ceylon and was a committee member of Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. He was a board member of the SIMA Sri Lanka division and also the Sri Lanka Accounting and Auditing Standards Monitoring Board. He was formerly the head of research at H&B Stockbrokers Private Limited and possesses plenty of experience in the fields of capital markets, economics, strategic finance management, research, and his lecturing experience expands for 11 years for SIMA ACCA examinations in Sri Lanka, India, Singapore, and Philippines. He holds an MBA in International Finance and a BSc in Computer Science. He is a fellow member of Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, and the Institute of Certified Management Accountants. He is also a Chartered Global Management Accountant. Hasitha was the winner of the Tutor of the Year at SIMA Global Financial Management Awards 2009, held in London during November 2009. He was the winner and gold medalist of prestigious SIMA Star of the Year Award in 2012 and the winner of Young SIMA Star of the Year Award in 2006. He was the winner of the Most Outstanding Royalist of the Year Award in 1997 and was the Deputy Head Prefect of Royal College in 1998.
We are honored to have with us this evening Mr. Hasitha Premaratne, Group Finance Director of Brandix Group. A very good evening to you.
Good evening.
And today, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, that we'll be touching on the apparel industry. So the main topic these days is the pandemic and about how this pandemic has affected different industries. So let's touch on how it has affected the apparel industry.
Yeah, I think like any other industry, apparel industry is also impacted quite significantly. And if you look at the main areas, if you look at the last 18 months, I think the biggest challenge has been getting the orders executed on ground, which has been one of the bigger challenges, especially because this is an industry which is more labor oriented, so there is a lot of factory related activities that are happening, so that makes it challenging to ensure to keep the day-to-day activities going, particularly under the current circumstances. But that said, I think there are two other big things also happening parallelly. On one side, we have our industry raw material, the main raw material, which is cotton. The cotton prices are going up quite sharply, and it has been going up for the last 1 year almost, and we are seeing more than 100% increase in the last 1 year, which is unprecedented. I mean, these are very tough times on one side due to COVID, but on the other side, parallel, when you are looking at cotton prices increasing quite sharply, the raw material that comes is being main raw material that's being used in the apparel industry is increasing sharply. So that's something that is quite challenging for the whole supply chain. When I say supply chain, I'm talking about the people who are converting the cotton into yarn, and then the yarn to fabric. That's the fabric mill, and then the fabric is converted after that to the finished product, finished garment, which in turn gets exported out there, and then that goes into the market. So consumer ultimately has to pay for the increase, but then the whole supply chain shares certain part of it which has a big impact on our cost structures on one side.
So that is with regards to the raw materials being priced highly these days because of the pandemic. So previously,
actually, it's not the pandemic. This is a different reason.
Right.
The cotton prices increased due to mainly because Xinjiang province in China, I'm sure you're aware of, there were some issues related to complaints about compliance issues, which then the US government banned cotton from Xinjiang province. Now, that's the province which brings bulk of the cotton, Chinese cotton out. So when you take that piece of the supply almost to zero, then the demand for rest of the cotton coming from India, coming from Pakistan, Indonesia, etc., will keep going up. So there's a sudden supply drop and a price increase, and as a result of that, or the demand increase. So
that's
the
because
demand
of the
staying.
scarcity.
Exactly, and
Right.
that creates the price increase. The demand and supply equation creates the price increase, and it has been there for some time. Generally, you see these cotton price increases coming every 5 years in cyclic. It's a cyclic effect.
It's just
But
that it kind of went
got augmented due to this
Exactly.
Indian cotton issue, and that has unfortunately sparked it for quite a long time now. So that's having a clear impact on the industry as a whole. The whole supply chain is impacted there. So that's one. The second thing is not necessarily only to the apparel industry. The whole import-export industry is going through a massive challenge because of these logistics costs, shipping costs going up, and that from a cost perspective is in certain areas about 5 to 10 times more than what it was pre-COVID. So that, of course, is a result of COVID mostly, the disruption that took place. But
And how about labor? Now, there was a period where nobody was working in the apparel industry. What kind of an impact has it made in the industry itself?
Yeah, the labor costs, I think the local labor cost has been somewhat increasing time to time, but obviously that has had a fairly steady increase, I would say. I wouldn't say it was an abnormal increase, and in this situation also it has been increasing, but it's not going on an abnormal basis. And of course, it's a rupee expense, at least not like the raw material and the logistics cost, which is in dollar terms we have to bear that cost. So there is some depreciation in the local currency, which has also helped us to offset the labor cost increase and some of the local cost increases that are currently happening within the country itself. So there's some offset that is happening in the rupee expenses that happen within the country, including the labor cost. But I must say that those two specific issues coming into the cost pressures has been quite challenging. So that's the cost side of the story, which is adding to the execution challenges that we have on ground. And also I must reiterate that the logistics issue is not necessarily a cost increase only, but also a bottleneck from a supply perspective as well, because the vessels are delayed. We have to have extra inventory. So these vessel delays also cost a lot and bring a lot of challenges to the industry, because if you don't have the raw material to start your sewing operation, naturally there is additional burden that you will have to bear. So these areas are adversely impacting on one side, but on the other side, the positive side to the story is that compared to maybe 15 to 16 months ago, today our order books are fairly stable, and in fact orders are coming in thanks to mainly the strong vaccinations and that took place in the Western world, particularly earlier in the early days, and that gave a faster than expected increase to the order book and to the demand. Which at least made sure that we have the orders. So that's a positive sign. On the other hand, so it's really a question of balancing on one side, getting the orders on the table and having the orders in hand. On the other side, obviously the cost pressures are there, logistics bottlenecks are there, challenges on ground in getting the factories to run are there. So these to be balanced is something that the industry is going through. It's not something that Sri Lanka is going through, Sri Lankan industry is going through. It's something that the whole world is going through. You would have seen in the news, Vietnam went through a fairly tough patch. They started well, but they had a tough patch in the last few months. Some of the other countries like India, etc., had the same problem. So I think it's a mix of challenges that the global industry is facing. But as a Sri Lankan apparel industry, we have been fairly resilient, and we've been working through this pandemic to come out and manage these challenges and work ourselves to continue to be seen as a important apparel sourcing destination for our global buyers.
Exactly. And let's touch on transformational changes. What do we intend to do in terms of facing competitors the world over?
Yeah, this industry, like any other export industry, has to fight the world. We can't be fighting our own competition at home. It's about fighting the world, because if you're not competitive with the global vendors, global suppliers, then you're not in the play. So as a country, I think we have a few challenges, as we all know. We spoke about before about the cost part of it, which is more relevant to Sri Lanka. So that's something that need to get gradually addressed. But one of the things that has helped us is the rupee depreciation over the years, that has kept the cost competitiveness going to great extent. But in the meantime, but that's not a sustainable way of looking at things. But more sustainably, when you talk about the benefits and the impact, I think it's on one side we need to get more into automations, right? Automations are automating the factories more and more, so that we reduce the human sort of interventions and create more capacity.
And it's time saving as well.
Exactly, it will save time and one side, and more importantly, it will reduce the manual errors through the automation and give you a better productivity as well. So it's a productivity upliftment, which means that within a say X amount of time, minutes, you generate more products, more and more products. So that is something that we need to get into, whereas I think we are doing it as a country, as an industry, we are doing it, but I think globally there are many other countries across the regions who are doing it better than us. So that's an area which we need to focus and drive, because that will definitely give that competitiveness a big boost. The second I think thing is about getting into more better asset utilization, which means that you create more products within the same assets that you're using. Again, a productivity story, but there I think the number of plants that or factories that today we have as double shift operations is relatively less. So as the price become a challenge, you tend to look at other options, like having more hours being generated during a day, which means we need to run on a shift basis. So more factories should look at getting into double shift operations as we progress, and also that need to be done in a more sort of a scientific way, so that it will have a benefit on one side to the industry, to the company, but also on the other side it also gives the flexibility and better income, etc., for the employee as well, because our employees are the main stakeholder in our organization who will be working through these areas. So it's very important that it's being managed in such a way that there is a win-win and a good balance in getting things through. So that's also helping your productivity and to be better competitive. The other area that you need to look at is how, while of course you try to manage your cost better and get more product out, also how do you bring products which pay you better.
So it would also matter if we could actually work on new product development.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's something we need to really look at, because there, as you know, in any market, any product category, there are basic products, there are mid-range products, and there are premium products. So premium products naturally get paid better, but there are complexities in executing those products. Making the product itself may be challenging. There may be supply chain, the fabrics will be and other raw materials needed are very complicated, and also the number of orders, the size of the order might be small, right? So as you know, when you have small orders to execute, naturally there's a challenge in getting it out in the right way. So the cost also goes up with it. But with a higher paid order, if you learn how to do it with a better cost structure, you may have a better profit margin, and you may be able to pay your employees better and you reinvest back into technology, etc., better, so that we can build our base right up there to ensure that we have a much stronger position in the industry, not only just cost based, but also by generating a higher income, higher revenue, by earning a better selling price per product by upgrading the product range. So there product innovation, as you said, is the very important thing here. So we need to be design equipped, we need to have design capabilities and raw material capabilities to come out with these type of new products and newness in the product to be introduced. And that's something that I think as an industry we need to work a lot more than what we are doing today. I know the larger apparel players are doing it, but we need to have as an industry a bigger contingent to operate that way. And the other point is the digital world.
Exactly.
I mean, the whole world is going through digitalization, as you know. The COVID did make that maybe a 3 to 4 time acceleration. It gave a boost,
and it made everybody get comfortable with having online transactions and also working online.
Exactly, exactly. So I think that is something that we need to get used to. Like you said, one is the e-commerce piece, which is where people are starting to buy online, and in the last 1.5 years, that online segment of purchases have risen significantly, 25-30% growth, even more at times, right, compared to the previous years. So that's a interesting thing when you look at it from an overall e-commerce perspective, because while it gives the buyers, our brands to whom we supply to, a possibility to penetrate deeper into the households or the consumers. It's also making certain demands like small lot orders to be taken, more customizations to happen. So that will require the supply chain to deliver things a little bit differently. So that's a important change that is happening on the e-commerce side. The other side is also about how we operate as an industry, like the working from home environments on one side for certain areas. So that's something we should learn from what we went through in the last maybe 15 months, 16 months, and try to push ourselves to have a more policy of operating certain days from home, certain days from office. But we should not lose that people touch, but have to bring that together. But more importantly, going beyond working from home, the digital world will definitely bring us also other aspects, because we work with US, London, various global cities, right? Our customers' points are there. So these customers and us, how we work, we used to carry the courier the samples, we used to take the product and fly, and for meetings. Now those meetings have become virtual.
Everything
so a lot of us
virtual,
can now join those meetings, and also getting into more 3D type of technologies and other virtual technologies, where even the sampling can be done virtually. So these are the new trends that are emerging. So I think it's important that as a country, as the players in the country, we have to get together and build a framework and infrastructure to stay ahead in this digitalization environment, and obviously make use of that as a competitive advantage to stay ahead of rest of the global competition we are going through.
Exactly. And how about the challenges faced by the SMEs in this industry as well, Hasitha?
Yeah, so the issue is that some of these things I said about transformation, be it the product transformation, be it the what do you call this automation side of things, or even when you look at some of these other conversions that you need to do to change, you need investment, right? You need to invest money, and sometimes that return on that investment takes a little bit of time, especially during the first couple of years. You may not get much. You will have to invest and watch and develop things, even in digitalization and other matters as well. So
it applies to any industry, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. So in that context, the larger players generally tend to benefit, because you as larger players, you have the money probably to invest and have that little bit of deep pockets to hold on to things and manage things over a slightly longer period of time, right? So the small players, SMEs, that's where the challenge comes in, where some of these SMEs may not have the money to invest into either people or to the technology or to infrastructure. So onto different aspects, you may not have that investment to be made and that ability to have headroom to give some time for that investment to repay. So as a result, some of these SMEs will struggle to do this transformation compared to a large organization. So that's where I think the industry has to come, maybe the government has to come into the party and look at some of these areas and support in those specific maybe transformational themes, to see whether the SME segment also can work through this and transform itself. Because at the end of the day, if there is no SME, that's the backbone of the whole economy, right? So you can't have just 4 or 5 big players and expect the industry to grow or to the economy to grow. You need the SMEs, you need the larger players to be with it. So that is the important area that probably from a government perspective as well as from a national angle, and as an industry, I think we are doing certain things to support the SMEs and hold hands together. But it need to be more. I think definitely a bigger organization will have a better chance in going through this and be more cost competitive. But that said, I think it doesn't mean that the SMEs can't do this, right? The SMEs can do this, but they need to look at what is the requirement, where the key resources should go, and that additional support, especially the investment and the financial support, is something that they need to seek in different order.
And we've come towards the final few minutes of the show as well. Hasitha, so how do you see the apparel export industry growth, and what do we envisage in the near future?
Yeah, so I think industry growth I will look at in two ways, right? The first thing is the traditional way of looking at industry growth. When you talk about apparel industry, you talk about factories, right? You think about factories, right? So naturally you're talking
That's
about
the first thing which comes to
your mind, right? So that means you're producing the goods in Sri Lanka and exporting it out of the country, right? That's one way of doing it. So in that segment, we are doing about $5 billion today, roughly. The COVID has sort of brought us a little bit down here and there, but we have the capacity really to run at about a $5 billion. But at a probably if you stretch it with better productivity and also getting more workforce in, you might be able to stretch up to about 7 billion, 7.5 billion at a max, in my opinion, right? Because there is a huge dearth of work. The workforce is something that we don't have. We are hunting behind workforce. It's a big challenge to get our workforce intact. So naturally, there will be a kind of a bottleneck to grow beyond 7 billion or 7.5 billion. That's probably at a max. Even to get there, it will be a struggle, right? But the second angle of growth, possible growth, is to think about the front end activities we have, right? In the sense the product development, design, sourcing, customer relationships, the marketing aspects of it, the financing capabilities. If you look at these and look at as more of the, we call it the front end activities of the apparel industry, whereas manufacturing, if you say the back end activities, right, these are the front end activities. So these activities, if we can perform in Sri Lanka, we have good people, good talent, we have good infrastructure in that area. Like I said before, we have design capabilities, etc., that's emerging and growing. If we invest more into that and build that up, then we don't necessarily have to manufacture entirely in Sri Lanka. If you don't have the capacity in Sri Lanka to support, we can go to Bangladesh, we can make in India, we can make in Pakistan. I mean, if you take these three countries, I think we have about almost 1.7 billion people in these three countries, right? So if you can get it, the manufacturing done there subcontracted, and we take the orders, maybe the value addition in Sri Lanka might be less, maybe it might drop to about 10-15%, right? But still, you can grow maybe 20, 30, 40 billion dollars. In billion dollars in the apparel exports, but obviously the manufacturing may not happen here, but that is what we call this hub concept, entrepreneur trade or the hub concept. The laws are available.
Like working together.
Yes, it's bringing the region together,
right.
And Hong Kong did that to China, right, with China over the years, and they have come out quite strong in that front, where all the buying officers, etc., being set up. So that's a huge value addition to the economy with white collar jobs. So I think it's a balance of the two that is needed. You can grow up to about maybe 7 billion range maximum with the manufacturing model, but beyond that, if you want to grow, I think 20-30 billion more can be taken in with maybe 10-15% value addition in the country, right? 10-15% value addition in the country, rest being subcontracted to the region ideally, and that way we can actually have a growth. Because just work out the numbers, if you take 30 billion at 15%, right? That's that's $4.5 billion. That's not small money, and that's net export growth that you will get if you really look at how to get the dollars into the country. And dollars is today's goal, right? We need dollars in the country, and this is an area which I think we need to focus and drive. Again, some of the larger organizations are already doing it, right? And we need to make sure that that grows further, and that emphasis comes in, so that we can see as a apparel hub in the region.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hasitha Premaratne, for giving us an in-depth look at what the industry looks like at the moment and what we can expect in the near future as well. Thank you very much for joining, and have yourself a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
With that, we conclude this week's edition of Business Today. Thank you for tuning in. Have a pleasant night.